started initially, my name is Eric, and I'm one of the technology librarians here at Loveland Public Library. We are so glad that folks are sticking with us to do some of these classes virtually. We had a whole big giant summer of learning of maker equipment ahead of us, but it seems like we're having some very interesting stuff happen in the world, you know, with the whole pandemic. So that's fun. And I teach the 3D printing classes. I also teach the carving classes. We do a lot of one-on-one appointments with folks for the maker equipment. But like I mentioned right now, because of the pandemic, we have to be a little creative with how we're teaching folks. So more than likely, we'll be doing Zoom appointments with folks, and then we can teach you kind of from a distance. And okay.
Sounds good.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get started, because we want, the very first thing we want to do is go to the Inventables website. Okay, so we have here the Inventables website. So like I said, Inventables is the company that makes Carvey. When you first get on the website, to get to Easel, which is the design software, we want to click this link right here in the middle. You can go directly to inventables.com/technology/Easel, but you know, that's a lot to type. And then we're going to want to click the button that says Explore Easel. Now, if you've never used this before, you're going to make an account. I'm going to show you how to do it. I already have a library account that we're going to log into in a minute, but we're going to use this big button here that says Sign in through Inventables. And then if you're a new, like, they're going to label you as a customer, even though you're a designer, but we're going to say new customer if you've never made an account before. And then just like with every other, you know, cloud software, email, password, name, and then you just have to consent to the privacy policy and terms of use. And so if you want to let me know when you are done with that part, then we can, I'll go ahead and log into our library account. We can go from there.
Okay, it looks like I have an account.
Oh, and you know what? It looks like our other patron has entered. So I'm going to go ahead and admit them to the class. Okay.
All right.
So. Alrighty, so it looks like we've got Sean. Are you able to hear me and see the screen, Sean?
Yes, yes, I can. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, thanks for coming. I'm so glad that you were able to. So we barely got started, and so if you're ready, I can kind of fill you in on what we explained thus far.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. And you're able to see my screen where it has like all these different designs on it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay. Just to let you know, I am recording this so that I can put it on YouTube later. So you can keep your camera off, but know that your audio might be on a public recording. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And let me ask you real quick, have you ever done any sort of design in a cloud-based software or any carving with a CNC mill?
No carving, but I do a lot of Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator.
Awesome. So the really cool thing that I think you and the other students, you have some background with creating things digitally to make them physical. So the really great thing about Carvey is you can actually make stuff in Illustrator and Photoshop, and as long as it's a vector, you can pop it into the machine, it's going to carve.
Okay, that's what I kind of had assumed. Perfect.
Yeah, it's some really cool stuff. I think before we get going, I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick because I think I want to just show a couple samples of what we have carved here at the library. that I have on hand. Most of the really cool stuff has gone home with the people who've made it. So,
Nice.
so this right here, this is a wood plaque that it actually had something carved all the way out of it. Now, the reason this is really cool is that this is really hard, thick wood. And so we do have drill bits that will carve all the way through something.
Wow.
So the really great thing is, everything has to be, when you're using a CNC mill, you're subtracting. So the mill itself, it doesn't really, our design, it doesn't have the capability to kind of round an outside of a shape. But what it's going to do is it can carve out something from an existing block. So let's say I wanted a really intricate design carved out. It's not really going to be able to like carve the edges, but it can carve it out from the center. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. So, and then we've got something like this. So this is just a very, very simple little thing. You can see, depending upon the material, you can make some pretty interesting things. Like this is a 2-color material, so by carving at a certain depth, we can get like a 2-color sort of feature here. And then something like this, we can actually do designs, we can do text, and then we have a lot of different materials available. So we've got different types of wood. Some are hardwood, some are softwood. We've got plastics, like I showed you. We've got PVCs of varying thicknesses. We've got MDF. With the machine, you can actually purchase or bring in your own material.
Okay.
So as we get going, I will, of course, explain the different types of material you can use, but just know that you can buy what we have here at the library. It's $3 per board, or if you bring in your own, as long as it fits within the machine's capacity, you can use the machine for free. We're not out to make money. We only charge a tiny bit for this so we can buy more. That's all.
What are the size specifications, if I may ask? Sorry.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and tell you now, and I'll remind you down the road. So the Carvey, it's not super big. Let me remind myself. So it's about 11 3/4 wide, and then 8 deep. So yeah, it's not super big. So a little bit less than a foot, and a little bit over, or a little bit less than 8 inches.
But the thickness, you said that it could do pretty thick, so.
1 inch, yeah.
Okay, wow, okay.
Yeah. So like this one right here, this is 1 inch or a 1/2 inch.
Yeah.
The machine itself will do up to 1 inch. Just know the more wood it has to remove, the longer it's going to take. So
yeah, I was going to ask that too. So when you make a design, and if you put in, what type of material it is and all that sort of thing, will it give you an estimated time it will take for each design, or?
Yep, and I'm going to show you how that actually works in the software. So now that we kind of have a little bit of background of what the capabilities are, what sort of we're looking at, let's go ahead and get back into the software. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here. And Sean, so how we get to, so Carvey's the name of the machine. Easel is the name of the software that you can use for free to design for the machine. Mm-hmm. So we go to the website inventables.com, and I can actually, if it's not in the chat box for you, I will get it in the chat.
I already signed up for an account. Yep, thank you.
Even better. Okay, awesome. So then you, once you get to Easel, explore Easel, you can sign in, and then your guys' screen should kind of look like mine, except without projects, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So a couple things to note real quick. If you go to account, it's going to tell you you have the option to buy a premium or Easel Pro account. You don't need to do that. So Easel Pro is the account type that works best for the X-Carve machine. That is another one of the Inventables machines. We have a Carvey, and if for some reason you're using one of the settings that is for Easel Pro account, we're not going to make you purchase an account at the library. You can just use ours. So anything, if it says money anywhere, ignore it, because you won't have to worry about that.
Oh, wow.
And then if you take a look where it says toolbox, you may or may not have different bits in here that kind of show the possible bits we have at the library. If you don't see any bits in here, that's okay. Once you actually get some designs going, they're going to pop up depending upon which machine that you choose. But these ones here on the screen, as you can see, we've got 7 different bit types. And then there's a couple different sizes as well. So just some things to get going with. We can also see a materials list. These are all the materials that we have at the library. You may or may not have the same list in your account. But know that the materials we have, they do come and go. So if there's really a type that you want, like I said, you can buy it, bring it in, carve for free. So, okay. The very first thing we can do to get started with projects is we're going to click this green button here that says New Project. And then it's going to load the design software. Before we do anything else, we need to tell it which machine we're using. So right off the bat, under machine, we need to tell it not Xcarve, we're using Carvey. Inventables really loves to advertise that Xcarve, so it defaults most often. Okay, and so your screen should look like mine, where you see something that looks like graph paper, and then something that kind of looks like wood. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Erica, I'm having trouble because it wanted me to verify my account, and so when I went in to do it, it hasn't verified it yet.
Oh no, okay. Let's see. So what we could do right now, if it's going to give you trouble, okay. I have a student proxy account that I can share with you if you'd like.
Okay, yes.
Log in real quick, and we don't have to worry about, and you'll probably get the email the moment I send this to you, but that's okay. So
I know.
Let me type this in real quick. Let's see.
Oh, I think I might have got it. Wait, oh, let's see. If I click new project, oh no, that doesn't show it either.
Okay, so try that, and then let me put the password in for you. Okay, let's see if that does the trick.
Sorry, I can't see the chat anymore. Where'd that go?
Okay, so if you see a menu that says more with 3 dots, click there.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yep, I just. Okay, I gotta log out of my account. Try and log into yours.
Yeah, I'm gonna test that to make sure it works. Maybe it does have the L in there. Oh. That'll be interesting. It's been a little bit since I've taught this.
Huh. Carbon vegetables, Easel.
Let's see. Maybe I think I might have grabbed the wrong outdated instructions that okay. Let's see. Okay, so that one logged in just fine. So what's the other account? Okay. And so yeah, it just hasn't sent you the verification email yet?
Oh, well, it sent me it, but when I tried to return it, I didn't get anything. But now I think it went. So, okay, so when I get back in there, I just re-logged in. Where should I go once I get into it? To Easel or projects?
Easel.
Okay. And then explore Easel. Now it wants me to sign in again. Sorry, if I had known. Oh, there we go. Woohoo. Okay, now I'm here.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, sometimes, honestly, teaching a lot of cloud-based software, this is always the biggest hump, is getting people signed in. That's okay. No worries.
All right, I'm good. It shows my grid. It has my name on it and everything.
Perfect,
it's amazing.
Perfect. Yeah, so it'll start with your name. Mine looks probably a little bit different because I'm not a new user, but it usually starts off with a design that's like a guy with a square saying howdy, or, you know, it has.
Yes.
So what you guys should do is do File and New to get a totally blank canvas like what I have, because we want to make sure we're using Carvey, and then it's totally blank.
Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty. So I'm going to show you all the different settings that are here, and then I'm going to show you how we're actually going to set up the machine to be able to accept a design. Now, there's two things we need to keep in mind. So we have to design we have to keep in mind the capacity of the actual material we're going to use before we start designing. So what I mean is, let's say I design something really big, like just, I want to have this circle, like this, carve out. But that would mean that I would need to use a 12-inch piece of wood, because if my wood is smaller, it's not going to carve that way. So what I like to tell my students to do is, before we start designing, we need to pick our material first. So we need to figure out the size of the material, the type, and then that's going to really indicate what our design is going to look like. So I'm going to grab some of these. I've got some different material here I can show you. Just, I showed you these couple of samples here, but I can kind of show you why that's important. There we go. Okay. So, if I design something for a really thick piece of hardwood like this, it is going to require a different bit or a different type of bit than something like a thin piece of plastic like this. Mm-hmm. So, like, let's say a angled, or they're called V-bits, this is going to make a really nice design on this, but on this, it's going to cause it to be a little bit wonky. So we're going to go over all of that, but I just want to get you thinking before you sit down to design, pick your piece of wood. So like, let's say, okay, I really like this piece of wood because it has some nice striations in here. I can carve at different depths, make some cool designs. So I'm going to design with this piece in mind. Or vice versa, I really like this piece of wood. It's nice and thin. I could make something like I could make like a brooch, I could make like a name tag, I could make a keychain. So I'm going to design with this in mind. And then another thing that we've done here at the library is, a lot of these, we write some instructions on the back, what bits are the best, what the actual size of the material is. We also have some very handy posters right behind the machine, which I can't turn the camera to show you because it's directly behind the computer, but some bits work better than others on specific material. So I actually might be able to get that site to you. But if not, I believe in the handouts I sent, some of that is in there.
Yeah, I saw that in the email.
Perfect, yeah. So let me take a peek. I think it's in... Yes. Okay. So page 4 of your handout that says Easel for teen and adults, that shows you what some bits can do to some materials than others. So as you can see, if you're on page 4 of the handout, and let me share my screen so our after the fact viewers can take a peek. So you can see here that a down cut bit on acrylic is super ugly. It's all feathery. It destroys the plastic. But a straight cut bit, or an upcut bit, pardon me, that is going to give us a really nice smooth edge. Let's go down to something like hard maple. A straight cut looks really nice. An upcut is a little feathery. A down cut is not as smooth. So there's not as much difference in bits for this material type, but you can see how it really varies. So that's the best indication for why you should have your material in mind before you design. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So let me go back to other screen. Here. Okay. So just for today, I'm going to pretend that I am going to be designing for MDF. And then before we get going with that, I'm going to go back to the camera. Okay. So that I'm going to kind of show you how we're going to measure this, because there's 3 measurements we need. 3, there we go. 3 measurements we need per board before we can start designing. So one, we need to know what type it is. Again, we do list what the material is on the back here, but if you're purchasing ahead of time, you're gonna know what the material is. So we need to measure the length. If I take a look at this guy here and I measure it, you can use metric, but Carvey does use standard, so inches.
Okay.
So here is about 8 7/8 in length. And then I'm gonna measure the width. So my width here is about 5 3/4. So most of these are standardized when you order them from Inventables, and you can use any piece of wood. So that's why you really got to know what the dimensions are.
Mhm.
That's the first measurement I need, and you can kind of write them down. The next one you're going to need is you're going to need how thick it is. So you could measure using a ruler. It's not as accurate though. We need to be very, very accurate, because if you think about how the drill bit is going to carve down into our material, it can have very small increments of depth. So, less than a millimeter, less than a 1/4 millimeter. So we need it to be very accurate. So here at the library, we actually have one of these digital calipers. And so when we measure the thickness, see if I can do this backwards for the camera. There we go. So when we measure the thickness, it's going to give us a much more accurate readout. So this is 2.5, or no, 4.8. There we go. So 4.8 millimeters, which I'm going to want to change that to inches. So this is, using the calipers here, is 0.19 inches. So they sell this as 1/5 inch board, or yeah, one fifth. That's not exactly true, because it's 0.19, not 0.2. So knowing the exact thickness of this is going to make our design be better in the end. So knowing those 3 designs, let's go back to now. On the right side of the screen here, we're going to change the material, change the measurements. So I'm going to click right here where it says birch plywood. That's the default material. And then where it says material type, I'm actually going to scroll down in this list. So I have MDF, so gray MDF sheet. That's what I had. I'm going to click there. You can also, sometimes it lets you change the color, or sometimes, I don't know. It used to let you change the color of what it looked like, but that's okay. So let's see. MDF. Here we go, MDF. Oh, there we go. So you have to be under Easel material type MDF, and then you can actually change the color if you want. So we can have, here's my color, exact gray that I had. And then our width, which is our x-axis, so that was, what did I say? It was 7 7/8, which it wants you to use decimals. So you can have a converter if you want. I'm just going to put 8.5 because that's close. That's pretty darn close. And then our length, which is our y-axis, that was 5 3/4. And then as you can see behind this screen, what my material looks like changes. And then thickness, I need to put 0.19. And you can see how that thickness has changed. So that's very, very important. If we don't do this, when we go to try to carve, the machine isn't going to know what our material is. So we're going to have a really bad time with that. Over here, we have the option to change bits. We're not going to do that yet. In a little bit, I'll explain what all the different bits do and how they kind of change the outcome. But for now, we're going to actually get into the design process. So Sean, in the beginning, I was explaining to Melissa how the handout I gave you, it gave specific instructions how to make plant markers, which are some of the things that we designed at the library for first-time users. So it was springtime, we wanted to show them how to make a project. I've actually found with the online classes, it tends to be easier just for me to explain how to do and what the tools are, and then you can make your own things and ask questions.
Okay.
So if we are kind of following along, we've already gone through how to make an account, what it looks like, how the machine needs to be set up. And so now how we can start using the software is we're going to start looking at some of the tools for design.
Okay.
Alrighty. So another thing I do want to mention is I talked to you about the limitations of the material. So let's say we have our 8-inch piece of material. We actually are not going to have 8 full inches of design capabilities. So what I mean by that is we will not be able to use the entire board, because we have to keep in mind the machine, it has to clamp down the material to hold it in place for the drill bit to actually drill out. So in a little bit, I'm going to actually turn the camera on. I'm going to tilt the screen. I'll let you watch me set up the clamps, but just know that we really are going to have about an inch or a ½ inch to a full inch on all the edges that we are not going to be able to carve.
Okay.
And that's just the limitations of the machine. You know, it has to be able to hold the material down, so we can't carve over the clamps, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then this big red halo here on the corner of my design platform, that's an indication for this piece inside the machine called the smart clamp. The smart clamp is what calibrates the tool or the drill bit, and what tells the tool, the drill bit, where to go. So we cannot put anything near that, because any sort of carve or mess up with that, it could ruin the whole machine. So that's why there's this big red thing that tells you you can't put anything over here, and the machine won't even go near there. So if I try to carve something like here, it's not going to do it. When I hit carve, it's going to say nope, it's touching the smart clamp, can't go. But like that would be fine if it's right up against the edge, sure. But hanging over, it's not going to do it. So. Okay.
Eric, the smart clamp, that faded section is not showing up on mine. Is there a way to toggle that on and off?
There is not. So yours, it might be you haven't chosen Carvey machine. So up at machine, make sure you have Carvey selected.
Ah, that was my problem. Thank you.
Yeah, it likes to, like I said, it likes to default to the Xcarve because that's their kind of flagship pride and joy machine. Carvey's kind of a forgotten brother machine. So, but we sure love it. We've made a lot of really cool things with it. And so we want our patrons at the library to love it too. So, okay. So with 2D design, we can make some pretty cool stuff with it. I will right off the bat mention that Carvey is not super good at doing kind of bulbous curves. So what I mean, like it can carve circles, but if we're trying to do curves, like a curved piece of wood, like a spoon, that's not 100% the capabilities of this machine. You can trick it into doing that with a lot of practice and a lot of work, but this is really more sort of 2D. It's not really meant to be a 3D carve. That's what the Xcarve is, and that is the machine that can do all sorts of really cool, smooth, nice 3D carves. So hopefully that kind of alleviates any concerns you had about, well, how would I design XYZ? Well, we're thinking more 2D with this machine. So,
okay.
First and foremost, we can name our project in the top left by clicking on the name. So I'm just going to type Eric's project. This is helpful so that when you go into your projects list, by clicking on the Easel icon, you can see all your different projects here. So we can see all the cool things we've designed for recently, like that thing I showed you. What do you love about the library? Well, I carved that. And then under File, we have the options to create a new design, open a design, rename. We can make a copy. In a little bit, I'm going to explain the SVG stuff and the share and publish stuff. But for now, what we're doing is we have the option to select from some shapes here. They're very, very simple, so not anything too fancy. But what makes this so powerful is the cut settings and the ability to edit the depths, whether we're doing the full outline, whether we're carving the entire thing out. So I clicked over here, I clicked a simple square. I've got it here on my board, and it looks pretty darn simple, but as you can see, I have my cut and my shape menu. So it gives us a nice preview on the right. If I drag that cut depth menu up, it becomes a lighter gray. On the left, on the right, we can see it's only cutting a very tiny bit into my actual board. So the darker my shape is, or the deeper it is, it's gonna cut all the way. So this little 3D render here shows that's gonna cut almost all the way out. If I drag this all the way to the bottom, cut at the depth of 0.19, you can see it's gonna cut out from the entire shape. So
can it do that without wrecking the machine?
Yeah, so that's, I'm glad you mentioned that. So I'm gonna explain that here in a little bit. So yes, it can carve all the way out. There are a couple things that we can actually do. So the first thing is the base board on Carvey, it's called the waste board for a reason. It is expected that you will make some carves into that without meaning to, or even purposefully, to be able to carve out some of these things. The other thing is you can actually stack wood on top of each other and use double-sided tape. So we have that at the library. Like, let's say, let me unshare my screen real quick and kind of show you. So like, let's say,
that way you won't have a tear out issue.
So yeah, and I'm gonna explain another thing it does too. So like, let's say I wanted to carve this all the way out, but I didn't want it to carve into the waste board. I could double side tape these two together like this, clamp them both down, tell this to carve a little bit deeper than this. So like this whole thing together would be 3/4 inch. I would tell the machine to carve 0.51 inches to carve all the way through, which would leave a little bit, it would carve all the way through the brown and then just do a little tiny bit of carve into the gray, into like a waste material. So we've tested that a lot and it works pretty good. I've not had too many issues with it. It's just sometimes getting the double-sided tape off can be kind of sticky. Otherwise, let me go back to share my screen here. When you are going to carve something all the way out, we have, let's see here, where'd it go? Here we go. So when we carve out a full shape like this, what the machine is actually doing is it's going around and around, and it's going to remove all of that. It's not going to remove a nice, neat square in the middle. So let me see if I can do simulate. There we go. So you can actually see the path of the machine. So it's carving this out and obliterating that material. So it's not carving out a square. If we wanted it to cut out the shape of a square, we would, in the cut menu, we're going to choose one of these different cut on shape paths. So we're telling it to do a path around the shape. So we have clear out a pocket, which would obliterate that material. Cut a shape on path would mean we're going to actually cut out that square for a reason. Can you kind of see the difference there?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Perfect, perfect. And then if we go back to the left, we have that nice thicker black, the path of the square, or the edges, and you can see those yellow points, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So what those yellow points are called tabs. So they leave these very thin, redundant pieces of material that hold that shape in place so it doesn't fly off with the speed and the force of the bit. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So you do have to, there's a little post-processing you have to do. So, you know, a file or an X-Acto knife, you'll have to kind of clean that up a little bit. But if you do not have tabs, what will happen is the drill bit will inevitably carve into your nice square, make it look ugly, big giant chunk removed from it. So yeah, we've done hundreds and hundreds of these at this point, and we've tested almost every possible error. That one's pretty common. So the tabs are going to protect that shape that you're cutting out. But if you have tabs, you can actually move where they're at. So let's say you really want them sort of on the centers so that you get nice sharp corners.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't show you on the preview because it assumes it's going to carve out all the material, but basically it's just hopping over, you know, the material there. It usually is so thin that you can see through it, but it ranges from like 1/10 of a millimeter to a full millimeter in thickness, depending on the material you choose. So the hardwoods tend to leave a tiny bit thicker tab because they can splinter, whereas the plastics leave a thinner tab because they're not as likely to splinter. So, and you can have less tabs. Like if you want to play it kind of dangerous, you could just have 2 to try and hold it in place, or you can have more tabs if you're really worried about it flying away. You can also indicate how big you want the tabs. So the length we could change that to be much thinner. So you can see how that changed how big they're going to be. Now the height, this is where you can change the thickness of the tabs. So we could make them really thick if we wanted to, or we could try to make them as thin as possible. But just know that a lot of the default settings that are here, they are what's recommended by the material you chose. So I'm going to change my material real quick to be hard maple. And then, let me see, will it go back? No, okay. Well, since I messed with the settings here, it's not going to go back. But usually what's there when you first get started is the default setting that they have found works best for this material.
Okay.
And you can play around with it 100%. Like I have always found that the more you play around, the more you learn. But, or I should say, and the more you play around, the more you learn, and you find what doesn't work. And then you have a lot of sort of half-made projects. But that's really the heart of being a maker, of using maker equipment, is you never are going to make something brilliant on the first try. It's a learning process. You're engineering something, you're designing something. So you might have this amazing idea in your mind, but it will take you a lot of practice or a lot of tries to get there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So your first carve might not be amazing, but you're going to learn how to try to make the next one more amazing. So okay, so where were we? All right, so we were talking about tabs and cutout shapes. So if we go back to cut path, we can tell it to cut inside the shape too. You can see how that makes it more of a rounded square.
Mm-hmm.
We could also cut shape on path, which would go inside. And every shape that we put in here, we have the option to tell it to clear out a pocket or cut around it. And then you could see the difference here. So if I have these 2 squares side by side, one of them is not carved all the way out. The result would be we have something carved all the way out and then something carved part of the way out, and then where it overlaps, it's just thinner. So that could be some interesting design choices there. And then even something like this, you know, that's another interesting design choice there. So even using only 2 dimensions, we can make some pretty darn cool stuff. And then if we go into the shape menu for this square shape, I'm going to tell it clear out a pocket so that it's a full square there. If we go into the shape, we actually can alter the edit or alter the vertices. So if you think back to geometry, you know, middle school, high school, the geometric parts of a shape. So we've got the faces, if it's a 3D shape, or the vertices, which are the corner points if it's a 2D shape. So if I go to edit points here, I can take these points and I can drag them to change them. So even with a basic shape, well, I could turn this into something way cooler if I want to. I could also, instead of it being a straight point, I could tell it I want it to be a curve. And make these like Bezier curves, which is pretty nifty. We can turn square into something kind of wibbly wobbly like this. There we go. And so now I've got this cool shape that didn't exist before. And then we could also then we go into cut, well, I could turn that into an outline again. So you can do whatever on earth you want to with these sorts of shapes. And that's just with a square. So there's a lot that you can do even with these simple geometric shapes to start off with. So any questions before I go on to the next tool?
Yeah. So then what if you wanted to do something that was carved double-sided on both sides? Like you just have to, when you're putting and designing it and placing it on the board, you just have to get the measurements just right so that when you flip it, it'll correspond well.
Yes. So there is some math involved and some trial and error involved.
Mm-hmm.
We've helped a lot of people do that exact same thing. And
Okay.
like what you could do, I'll go ahead and I was going to show you this later, but I'll show you now, is you can have this project here. You can actually
flip it horizontal so that it corresponds when you flip it, or?
Yeah, so you can actually make a copy of it. So at the bottom of your screen, there's your design plus sign. So if we click there, we can actually have another design that's associated with. We could also do file, make a copy.
Okay.
And we would have an exact copy of this. And then, like you said, we could totally flip it, you know, or we could, there's another setting here. Which one is it? Here we go. So under edit, we have flip horizontal, flip vertical. If we do vertical, well, there you go. It's going to mirror that.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we also have the ability to, when we're layering things under the edit menu, we could have the ability to send them backwards or send them forwards. So you folks have had some design with Fusion and Photoshop, so you kind of understand that layer.
Yes. Yes. Yep.
Perfect. So you can see here how by moving your layers around, you get different design options. So then that would help. So like, let's say when you flip the design, you need this to be the bottom or the top layer instead of the bottom layer. And then that changes it entirely. So it's kind of a creative process. You have to kind of, I tend to, when I'm designing things for Carvey or even 3D printing, I usually sketch it out first and kind of get my math or my sort of orientation figured out before I proceed. Because then you're using the digital tools to manipulate your material in the real world. So there can be a lot of planning. So really good question. Okay. Anything else?
Nope.
I don't think so.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to go back to, I don't really want this copy. I want to go back to where I was. Delete this guy. And I want this one. Alrighty. So that's the use of these basic shapes, which, as you can see, there's a lot you can do with those. And another cool thing about Easel is copy and paste, and those keyboard shortcuts work just like with word processing. But they're also up here under the edit menu. So I can select something, hit backspace to delete it, click on something, edit, Control or Command C to copy and paste it. So those are really cool tools that will help you in the design process. Just copy, cut, paste, delete, backspace. Those are, you can get them under the edit menu, or you can get them by using your keyboard. Under the edit menu, we also have some other really cool options. Let me get rid of these and just do a basic star. So we also have, like, let's say you have two shapes and they have different depths. We have these options here where you can select everything that has that same cut type or that same depth cut type. So that would be really cool if you had like a lot of these shapes kind of all over the place and you're trying to do these sort of layered effects with things. You can tell it, let's do select by matching depth. It selected all of my dark stars, all of my deep stars. So that's really cool to help you if you're trying to do those things that are layered or have more curvature to them. that will help you because then you can select all of that layer and then you could even align it. You can combine these so now they are one full shape.
Mm-hmm.
So let me actually, I'm going to show you that a little bit nicer, what I just did there. So I've got 2 stars. And let's say my design calls for them to look like this, or like this. If I click and drag, I can select 2 things at once, or click on 1, hold down your shift key, click on 2, now they're both selected.
Mm-hmm.
Under my edit menu, I have the ability to combine them. Now, it doesn't look like anything when they are carved out of a pocket. Let me go back here, and I'm going to make them cut the shapes on path like that. So that doesn't look very nice. That's not what I'm trying to achieve. I don't want 2 outlined stars. I want the perimeter to be carved out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag to select, edit, combine. Now it's going to do the perimeter of both shapes.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So that can make some really interesting design choices as well. And then
can you uncombine it? I don't see how to uncombine.
So
you'd have to just do undo.
Yeah. So edit, undo, combine.
So you'd have to catch it in
So
time.
if you change your mind later, you're kind of in trouble because there's no easy way to undo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, once it turns it into a full shape, it doesn't remember what the old shapes were.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of how you can manipulate those basic shapes. And I don't know if you notice this, but when I click and I drag to highlight 2 shapes or more, I get these buttons at the top that allow me to align. So similar with, Illustrator or Photoshop, you can align your things together, your text, your components. So I could align them both to the top. I could align them to the center. If I go back, this gives me the option to align like that. So that can help you get things be a little bit more precise.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. So now this tool on the left looks like a pen tip, the line tool. It is exactly what it says. You can draw lines. You can draw however you want. When you double click, then it actually turns the line into something that can be carved. So why this is really cool is we can go into edit points and we have the ability to edit those to be curves if we want. We can then take something very geometric and make it a little bit more organic looking. So that line tool lets you actually draw. So there's not something that kind of lets you freehand draw, but this gives you sort of path drawing like with Illustrator. And you have the option to cut it all the way out as a pocket or to cut just the shape. Oops. And then you could, of course, change the depth with the line tool. And then the tool below that is like a hole tool. So what it does, it drills just a precise single hole all the way through or at a certain depth. So this is helpful if you're trying to like make drill holes for things. I haven't honestly found too many uses for it, but you can, it's helpful because then you don't have to try to draw a circle and have it be drilled in. The other real fun things are you can make text and icons. So I'm going to do icons first so you can kind of see. So it comes preloaded with several hundred of these icons that are here that you can choose from. So like, let's say, okay, I like this spider. I've got this really cool spider design. I can do what I want with it, drag it to make it bigger or smaller, rotate it by clicking the top little mark here is the rotate. That's pretty cool. Do whatever I want. But note that sometimes when they made shapes, they didn't combine them. So like this, I just click the body, it left the head. So usually what I do is I'll select the whole thing and move it, or I'll go ahead and just combine the darn thing so I don't have to worry about it. But it's pretty obvious in the designs. There's a lot here. You can even look, like I can look for a dragon, you know, oh cool, there's some dragons. I could look for a dog. Oh cool, there's some dogs. But it is limited, it's only a few hundred. But the real power here is you can actually import SVG or scalable vector graphics into here. So you could draw something in Illustrator, save it as an SVG, import it. And how you would do that is this little, it looks like a door with an arrow. Click here, click SVG, we're going to import it. So I'm actually going to just show you what that looks like. So I would just need to, I'm just going to go to Google and get something from Wiki Commons like dog SVG. So here we go, Wiki Commons, dog. I like this. Let's go ahead and get the original file, save it in my downloads. Cool. So then I go back to Easel, my import button, import SVG, dog. Voila, there we go.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's how you can make things with other software, import them into here and still use them. You also have the option to import G-code. So G-code is the code for 3D printing. Yeah. So I've not had great success with this because 3D printing, it doesn't work as well with Carvey. Like G-code doesn't work as well with Carvey because Carvey is not meant to do as nice of curves as Xcarve. So you could try it, but I haven't had great success with it. The image trace is another tool that it's there, but you will have to kind of play around with it. I'm going to kind of show you what that image trace does. Oops. So what the image trace does is it allows you to import a JPEG or a PNG or basically a rasterized image, and then it's going to find the threshold for it and give you the positive negative space, what can be carved out, what can't. So let me go back to Google. Let me just do dog. And this one's got some pretty good contrast. So I'm just going to save this dog image. It's a JPEG. I'm going to go back to Easel, use my import button, image trace, and then upload a file from my device. And then there's my dogs. Upload. And then it's loading. So then you can see it finds the darkest contrast and it will allow you to change that threshold. So make it a little bit darker, try to make it smoother. So you can do some pretty cool things with this, like silhouettes and stuff, you know, and then everything in this image that's gray is going to be carved away. You can, of course, invert it, give it a second to load, and then everything that's gray will be carved away. So the white parts will be the highlights. You could also do trace outlines, but then that would be maybe something cool if you were going to like fill it with epoxy or resin or something. I actually did a project like that where I had it carve out just the outlines and then I filled the holes with epoxy. So that was pretty cool. So there are some pretty fun options here, but again, it's not super precise. So it's not like a laser cutter where it can cut out the exact image of a dog, but this is still pretty darn cool, you know? You could have like, it's almost like a lithograph in a way. And then if you import, well then now I have this dog design here. Now is probably the best time for me to, oops, you can see it didn't group that together, so I need to combine it. Now I can move it, okay. So now is probably a good time for me to explain the bits. Before we move forward, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. So as you can see, my preview on the right doesn't really look that great. It kind of looks like blobs. Like you can barely even tell what it is. So why is that? Well, the reason being is we have a 1/8 inch bit selected. So the bigger the number, the smaller the bit, just like with fractions. So a 1/8 inch bit is really big, but if we select a smaller bit from this menu, you can see, okay, that looks a little bit more like what this looks like. So I'm using this as a good example. Under our bit menu, we have a lot of bits to choose from. So if you go back to page 4 of your handout where it shows the material and bit pairings, you can see that, you know, MDF, MDF is not on that list because MDF tends to be the most forgiving material. But on, if we go into, so actually physically here at the library, let me unshare my screen real quick so I can show you. We have, I don't know why this is just our safety handout here. I think I didn't add it to the handout, sorry. But we actually have a list here of what bits go best with what materials. This can be found on Easel, but for MDF, the down cut bits are the best. And so I'm gonna try to get this sent off to you guys. If not though, it's literally right next to the machine so we can kind of take a peek. So for MDF, down cut bits are the best. Go back to share my screen. So for our dogs here, we would want a down cut bit, and it does only give us a little bit of option. So we could use an upcut bit for MDF. It's not the end of the world, but you can see only the bits that we physically have are going to be in the list here. So the difference between it started with a 1/8 inch, didn't look like anything. We're going to change that to be 1/16 inch. Well, that looks a little bit better. And then we can go all the way down even to a 1/32 inch bit. That looks a lot better. So you can see the different, the drill bits can only carve as big as they themselves are. So if the drill bit is 1/8 inch, the smallest possible line that it could carve would be 1/8 inch. Whereas, you know, a drill bit that's 1/32 inch, the smallest it can possibly carve is going to be 1/32 of an inch. So I've got a little bit more about bits I want to mention, but first I'm going to explain text and then we'll go back to the bits because there's the text shows a little bit better sample of some of the other bit explanations I have to tell you. So over here we have text, and it gives you a lot of fonts to choose from. When you're logged into the library account, it'll let you use the pro ones for free. You can also add fonts, like there's quite a few here in the font library if you don't find anything you like right off the bat. So this is for if you want to do text. So like, let's say I'm just going to pick this text here. If you click in the box, you can actually start typing. So I'll just type my name, why not? And then we could carve this, emboss it or carve it all the way out, you know, what have you. And then, but notice big text is totally fine. But the smaller you make the text, the more problems we might have trying to carve it with smaller bits. This is a good time for me to mention that most of the material has a really hard time with the 1/32 inch bit. Now this is a problem that they did recognize with the machine. It's probably why they stopped selling certain components for the machine. But the 1/32 inch bit breaks on almost every material except for soft MDF. So it breaks on the hardwood, it breaks on the plastics. We've gone through several dozen of these since we've had the machine. So it's a design flaw. It's not awesome, but don't get discouraged. I have an alternative I'm going to mention in a minute. So, but I just want to show you, like, the text looks great with 1/32, but it doesn't barely even show up with the 1/16. And then the 1/8, it doesn't even try to carve it unless we made the text quite a bit bigger. And then a 1/16 would work okay if the text was this size. But if we make it any smaller than this, it's going to start having problems. But let's say we choose a different font, like this really fancy one. Those parts that are real small, we're going to have trouble with. Because the lines are smaller than the bit itself. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we do have to be very particular with text. You know, it might look awesome on the screen, but can the machine actually carve it? With the straight bits, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But this is a great opportunity for me to explain the specialty bits, because they give us a lot more options and are a lot more hardy. So they're not going to break like the very tiny bit. So if we go down the bit list, we have these bit types called the V-bits. So what these are is these are beveled bits. So because they're angled, the tips, it can carve as small as the tip of the bit is. And then the deeper it carves, it's got like a bevel to it. So I'm just going to choose the 60-degree bit here. So the angle of that bit from tip to the shank is 60 degrees. You can see here, oh, that tiny text pops up fine. You know, even if I made it a lot smaller, it's still going to show up. Very cool. But I'm going to tilt our material here. Can you see how it's got a bevel?
Ah.
So our text is going to have a little bit of a bevel. So that actually, it's a really cool design feature. Actually, like if you stain the wood after, you'll get more stain that pools in here, and it looks really darn cool, actually. But this is how we can do very small things, you know, whereas the straight bits just won't do it. But we could even, like, here's our fancy text that small. Oh, it's still going to carve it because, you know, the tip of that bit is smaller than the text, so we can still carve it. And even some of these maybe fancier designs like Celtic knot here, let's make it tiny. And then, oh, okay, it's going to carve it. Very cool, you know? But there are some caveats. The depth here is what's going to really either make or break your design with the V-bit. So the shallow designs, this will carve just a tiny bit. It's going to have a very small bevel. It'll be fine. But if we try to carve way too deep with this, it might look good on the screen here, but in real life, it obliterates the design. So it's easier to show you on something that's a little bit bigger. So you can see here how we've got the bevel and then still a flat part, and then the opposite bevel. But if we carve really deep, it's like a trench. It just keeps getting deeper and deeper. So what that does, and it's not showing you on the computer screen, is where else like the halo of that bevel is. So it doesn't just stop here. It actually goes outside of the shape. And that's something you won't see until you actually carve. So the visual doesn't do justice. It's kind of sad. But let's see. This might give us, here we go. So this gives you a more clear picture of what it could look like. So if I'm trying to carve out that deep, you know, that's a really deep trench there that it's making. And then like that's a really deep trench, and then it's not nearly as precise as we would have hoped it would be, especially if we're carving all the way through, you know? So some of this, we do encourage trial and error. Like I would try little sections before you do the big project. Because if you try to do the big project and you've only got one piece of specialty wood, that might not be good. Whereas let's do some test pieces to see the capabilities of the machine. Because really, the options are infinite. Every piece of wood is different. Every drill bit is different. Every design will affect a piece of wood differently, dependent upon the design and then the drill bit that you choose. So there's so many options that so you really honestly do have to play around with it. But you can actually find that the machine will do things you didn't even know it could do, which is pretty cool. Like this bevel, like on some of the materials, the halo is so cool that it carves striations into the wood that becomes part of the design, you know? So it can be really cool or kind of break your design. So you just have to kind of practice. Let's see. There's one other thing with the V-bits. So the 90-degree bit, it actually, the 60-degree bit does a little bit better than the 90. The 90-degree has a much sharper bevel, so it tends to, it really wants to carve deep trenches. So just keep that in mind. And when you're trying to carve something all the way out using a V-bit, you just use a triangle, and like that. And then sometimes when you try to carve something all the way out using a V-bit, it won't carve the whole thing out because the very bottom is still adhered. So sometimes you have to make it be a little bit deeper, and then it will carve all the way out. But sometimes it doesn't show you the visual on the screen. So just keep that in mind. Let's see.
I have two questions about the bits. One, is there a way that we can like download for our own accounts which bits the library has?
So it should, when you have Carvey selected, it should automatically populate the bits that are part of what the library has. And so we do actually have all of these bits. We use some more than others, like this 1/8 inch single flute end mill. I think we've used it maybe once, because most folks, when people try to use Carvey, they really have specific design ideas in mind, and then they come to find out later what they were really designing needs a different bit. So, you know, people design and then we try to choose the most applicable bit. They don't really design with a bit in mind. So like one of these, this guy would be good for carving out a real thick chunk in a thick piece of wood, like that speech bubble design I showed you. A lot of folks haven't really tried to do that. So all of the bits that are going to populate in here we have all of these.
Okay.
The ones that I don't think we have is I don't think we have the 1/4 inch 90-degree shank in either 60 or, yeah, I don't think we have the 1/4 inch. Let me actually look. Let's find out. Get the box of bits here. Yeah, so we have 1/8 inch shanks, not 1/4 inch. So.
Okay. And then my second question about the bits, can you only use one bit per project, or is there a swap out feature like halfway through carving?
Yes. So see right here where it says use additional bit?
Oh.
Okay.
So like, let's say we want this design, I want it to be this bit, then I do add additional bit, and then 1/16 inch. So then I could then do my smaller text.
Okay.
Okay.
This bit.
And then at some point it stops carving and tells you to switch bits?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Sure does. So let me make sure I told you correctly, because text is maybe not the best example to try and show that. So let's do this guy. Is it going to show with? Yes, okay. Oops. So then we're going to have 1/8 inch. Doesn't show our snowman, or doesn't show our snowman. Add a bit, 1/32. There's our snowman. Okay, yes. So I did tell you correctly. So you can hit that add, and then when it's done with one bit, you'll switch it out.
Okay.
So now here is a really good no, I think I got a couple more things to show you, and then I think we're going to segue into me turning the camera and showing you the machine. Because I want to show you, there are some safety things we have to consider, and there are some things that only staff can do for you as per city safety regulations. So we'll get to that in a moment. When it comes to the feature of the apps, there's a couple more things here that are worth mentioning. Like this little Lego looking icon, it's the apps. So basically it's all these different design tools that people have generated and uploaded to the library. So it can do some cool stuff. So we've got like a puzzle generator, like that's pretty darn cool, or a texture generator. So like, let's say, get rid of the snowman, got this really cool triangle, go to my apps menu, I click texture generator, and then now it's going to apply some sort of texture into that shape. So we have a drop-down menu here, like, oh, what is this? Loading, oh, hey, that's really darn cool, holy smokes. Import, and then, oh, wow, it's gonna carve, oops, it's gonna carve that shape out of my triangle. That is
cool.
And then I would probably do B-bit for that guy, but like, that's so cool. Like, so those are what the apps can do. They do additional design features to things you've already made. So we even have like a gear generator. So let's say I wanted to make a wooden gear. I could do that, carve it out if I wanted to, you know. Choose that just so we can see it. Okay. So, okay, I could carve out a gear if I wanted to. Cool, I've got a wooden gear. How neat is that? And then there's, under generators, and there's a couple other things. So there's not a whole lot here, but there's the options that still make it pretty cool. Like you can do stuff that is not possible with the basic tools. So like, oh, path warp, like I can warp my text, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then under, at the bottom, you can import Dxf files. So those you can make in software like SolidWorks and some other CAD software. So if you design those in those softwares, you can import those. What is a super gradient generator? That's really cool. So that gradient generator, that's kind of, you know how I mentioned there was trouble with Carvey being able to do like smooth curves like the back of a spoon?
Mm-hmm.
What you can tell it to do though is do step downs and carve. So like one part would be deeper, the next part not as deep, the next part not as deep. So it'll be kind of stair stepped. And so it doesn't really show you a nice preview here. Generate detailed preview, let's see.
Okay, I saw some examples of those in their example projects or whatever, and I was wondering how they had done that.
Yeah, so it's possible, and usually it will have kind of a stair step sort of feature to it. Oh, I see what I did wrong. Hold on. Let me go back. Okay. Nope. Let me go back. Okay. So where's our gradient generator? Import. So I have to select the whole thing. So I need to drag and select the whole thing, move it over. Aha, there we go. Okay, so you can see here how it's like stair steps. So this will make curves for you, and then you would just go in with some sandpaper, sand it. There you go. So then these, you know, on top of one another, I could then remove parts of this shape where I've got sort of these stair step like there.
Cool. Nice.
Yeah. Just know there are some limitations when it comes to the actual time. So every time we put something in Carvey, every time we design something, we have the ability to hit simulate and see how long it's going to take. It says right here the design's too large. Oh, wait. That's why. Oops. So yeah, you can't put design things outside of your material. Let's try that again. Simulate. So we can see with a 1/16 inch bit, this design would take 21 minutes. If I change that to be the 1/32, simulate, that's going to take about 2 hours. So the smaller bits will always take longer. So you can see all the different things it has to carve. It's going to take about 2 hours. But I choose the V bit, simulate, about 1 hour and 34 minutes.
Wow.
So, but you have to consider how much material is it removing in each pass back and forth, and then the speeds. So our cut settings, we really don't want to mess with these. Library staff sometimes will mess with them to try and make it stop malfunctioning or try to help with overheating or things like that. But the cut settings, you can see there's different feed rates. So how fast the material is being fed into the drill bit, the plunge rate, like how deep it is per second, how the like the depth per pass, things like that. So it is dependent upon your material and your bit. So if we change this to the red oak, our cut settings, well, it feeds so much slower because it's a hard material. It has to go slower and less depth per pass. But then we choose something real soft like expand PVC, super soft plastic. Well, that can go much faster, 30 inches per minute or whatever. And then we choose MDF. MDF can go pretty darn fast, 40 at a feed rate of 40. So that can change the time as well. So if we go back to, let's see, where was I? Walnut. Walnut's a hardwood. We have a 60-degree V-bit. Oh, that one's fast. Never mind, 32. What was I looking for? Hard maple. There we go. That one's 28. We go to simulate. So that's 2 hours instead of 1.5 hours. So 2 and a quarter hours. So that is really helpful because then you can design this at home and then you know how long it's going to take you at the library. So you can plan.
Do you have to like pre-register for time then on the machine if you have a design? And
yeah, so this is a good time for me to explain the iCreate lab, and then here in a minute we're going to go to the actual machine itself. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so we can chat. So the iCreate lab, right now it's fully open even with the pandemic. We haven't had as many folks use it. So normally the reservations are 4 hours per day. That's to give everyone a chance. We were limiting it to once per week because of the pandemic, but I think right now we could have it be once per day. We just want to make sure that people have the opportunity to use it. It's not being monopolized. So if you want to come in and use Carvey every single day, that's awesome. As long as, you make a reservation and nobody else is using it, why not? We want our equipment used because it doesn't belong to the library, it belongs to the community. So same with anything in this lab. If you want to come in and sit here and use Photoshop for 4 hours a day, awesome. Fantastic. We want you to. So yeah, we want it used 100%. Normally, pre-pandemic, our 3D printers were running all day, every day, nonstop. And that was, people would come in and use Carvey all the time. We've got other cool stuff in this lab too, apart from just those machines. We have an art digitizer, we have video cameras, we have a professional microphone, we have digital drawing tablets, we have tripods to use the cameras. We have both computers are brand new 5K Retina display iMacs, 27-inch with dedicated graphics, full Adobe Creative Suite, Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere, InDesign, even things like GarageBand and Keynote, iMovie, stuff like that. Coming soon after things settle down from the pandemic, we have a Canon Rebel T7i camera that people can use.
oh, wow.
And we have a Surface Studio Pro that people can use. So that's forthcoming once things settle down from the pandemic. So we have a lot of really cool stuff in this lab. We want people to use it. The thing that's not in this lab that people use associated with this lab is our poster printer. So we actually have a machine that will print posters up to 44 inches wide on photo luster premium paper. So people come in and make stuff and we want it used. So what you do is you have to have a library card, and then you only one time you fill out an agreement. Basically, you are agreeing to use the space, adhere to behavior expectations, and it's sort of a liability. Like, we're going to help you be as safe as possible, but you cannot sue the library if the computer knocks over and falls on your foot, like that sort of.
Is that still necessary to sign if you're a city employee?
Everyone has to sign that, yes.
Okay, even if it's for business use, like we're doing it for our department?
It's if you're using it for the department, you still have to sign it because you don't work at the library. You're a library patron at that point.
Okay.
Like us staff, we don't have to sign that because we have all the training and we're not using it as patrons. Like it falls under us as library employees, like that whole safety thing. Like before we train anybody on the Carvey mill, for example, like it's part of our safety training. Like here's what we have to do to be safe with Carvey, or the 3D printer. Like when I train new employees on the 3D printer, I give them that safety training. And then the agreement is kind of external to library employees. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, but it's, it's no different than you're applying for a library card, you're applying to use the space. So it's literally just, you sign it, it'll be fine. We've never had a single issue with it, but it's more so city legal requires it of everyone who is not a library employee to sign it. But after you sign that, then you can email us, call us, walk in, for up to 4 hours a day, use the space. And then with our new website that's coming, now that I know you're a city employee, you know that we have our new city websites coming.
Yes.
We'll be able to book it online.
Okay.
Right now, we do not have a feature to book it online with the library's current website. The new website will be able to, so that's forthcoming. But yeah, you just give us a holler, we can book it, no big deal. And then when you book your very first appointment, it is recommended that you book a one-on-one with myself or a member of my team. That way we can kind of orient you to the space. Especially Carvey, like I'm going to show you some things here in a moment, but you might want that in-person visual with a couple things and stuff like that. So we have to maintain the social distance, but we still want to help you in person as much as we can. So.
Nice.
Okay. Any other questions about Easel before I kind of show you some things with the machine?
Nope.
Okay, cool. So I kind of, it's going to be a little bit wonky because I've got the computer camera and I tilted the machine and I'm going to try to tilt it as best as possible. When we first created these classes for summer, it was under the assumption it'd be in person. So having to alter it all to be virtual, some things are a little to be desired, but we're going to try our best. So there are a couple safety things, like I mentioned. Only staff can replace the drill bits. It's just, even though they're not, it's easy. It's just one of those, just like only staff can change the 3D printer filament because it's 600 degrees. So only staff can change the drill bit because they're sharp carbide edges. So we leave the drill bits out of the machine until you ask us to put it in. We're gonna pop it in the machine for you, and then we take it out when it's done. Some other safety things are you don't wanna be wearing rings or jewelry. You wanna have your hair back because, we did have someone get their ring caught on one of the clamps, and it didn't, not when the machine was running. So that's the next one. But we did twist her finger because it just got caught, so that wasn't too fun. This machine actually has some really cool safety features. We're gonna okay.
There you go.
So here is the Carvey machine itself. So here's that wasteboard I talked about. This is the limitations of the material. So let's say we've got the material here. This would fit, but anything beyond that grid is not gonna fit. Because the machine, we have to think about the actual capacity of this carriage here. Like how far can it go? How far can this go? So it's only about 11 3/4 by 7 3/4. Maybe a little bit, maybe about 8. Here's the smart clamp. So this goes and it clamps down the edge of the material. So what we do before we put the drill bits in is we have in this really nifty box here, all these different clamps and all these different screws to hold the material down.
Oh, okay.
So there's actually 3 colors of screws. So the red ones are for very tall material, so anything over 3/4 inch. The blue ones are for medium material, so anything over a 1/2 inch or over. And then the green ones are for thin material. So there are 5 screws per color, and we've got them in this box here. And so we actually need to put the 5 screws into the board. So that's how the material is held down. It's held down with screws. So there's 2 on the smart clamp, and then we need to have 1 on each corner to hold the material down. And there's also screw holes in the board on strategic locations that will allow you to then use these ramps to hold the material down. So what's really cool is most of our ramps are 3D printed because it only came with 5 and they got destroyed. So
Oh, nice.
all of these are 3D printed, which is pretty cool. So basically what we're doing, there's our screws, we have our ramps, and then we have our, I call them our stairs or our stair steps. So how it works is the ramp goes on like that. And then we're going to have the screw come down like this and screw into our board. So how that looks is I've got a screw hole here because I want to hold my material down right here. So I'm going to place my ramp and my stair step. So the stair step is going to hold the ramp. So the ramp is pressing down on the edge of my material. And then I'm going to use my screw to screw it in to the board like that. So then the ramp is holding, or the stair steps are holding the ramp, which is being pressed down onto the board by the screw. So I did the edge first, just in my excitement to show it to you, but you really want to do the smart clamp first. So the smart clamp, it already has pre-drilled holes. So once you get it kind of seated here, you can do the one over here, and then we can do the one over here. And then once that's in there, then you can go around and do the others. I only put them barely finger tight at first. You don't want to tighten them all the way down until you get them all in, kind of like with a car tire. You want to do like a star pattern to make sure it's equally torqued. So then we've got some other drill holes here. Well, I used a long ramp here because the drill hole was far away, but up here it's a little bit closer. So I could use a shorter ramp. This one's much shorter. So I've got my ramp, I've got my stairs. Get those kind of like that. Then I get my screw in there. Takes a little bit of hand-eye coordination. And then now we've got my ramp holding down the edge of my piece here. And then you can do another one over here. I'm not going to run the machine during our Zoom call because it's so darn loud you won't be able to hear anything else. And then also, I am not certain that it's going to run with the browser being taken over by 2 softwares, like by Zoom and, because this is browser-based, Carvey talks to the computer through the browser. So I am slightly concerned it wouldn't run. So I'm not gonna, maybe, I don't know. I could try.
So is that ever an issue? Like, what if you have, like, before we were having internet problems, what would happen if there was an interruption in the middle of carving?
That's a really good question. So if we're having internet issues, basically once it sends the signal, it's good to go. So as long as you keep the browser open, it's fine, because at that point it's talking to the browser, not over the network. It's just talking to the browser via the USB.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I remember when fiber was down just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. So then we would put another ramp over here, carve it down. And then this is the next step that staff actually has to do. So we have to put the drill bits in. And so we have this toolbox here with the different bits and some wrenches. And so you tell us, okay, well, I want the 1/16 inch bit. They all look a little bit different. So like here's 1/16 and it's an upcut. And so then because they are very sharp, like they're all carbide. And so I've gouged myself more times than one. So we don't want that to happen to you. So then we pop it in, but then we actually have to torque it down with the wrenches. So then we'll pop this in here for you. Make sure it's good to go. And then once it's in there, then we'll check your clamps, make sure they're good. Make sure that, like if this is way over here, we might check your design to see if you don't have anything that's gonna carve right here. And then from there, once this is all set up, ready to go, we close the lid and then we actually go back to the browser and we're gonna tell it to carve. So I'll kind of show, maybe, I don't know, maybe I should just get this actually oriented and show you what it's like. Because we've got technically 20 minutes left in class. Do you guys wanna watch?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, okay. So I think what I'm gonna do, instead of a brand new piece of material that's nice, I'm gonna find like a scrap piece that we can just muck up a little bit. Because we've got, where did that down here? Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to grab, this is just a scrap piece. What I need to do before anything else is measure it. So we've got 0.53. Pop that guy in there. And then this is going to use the blue bit, the blue screws, I think. And then I'll want to change my bit too. It's nice and straight. This first one in. Perfect. Put the next one in. And then we'll need to change our ramps because different size here now. We could do this guy. Got my ramp here. Got my stairs. We really want there to be a lot of touchdown as much as possible because if it's not overlapping enough, it's not going to hold the material down. So I probably need one that's a little bit longer. So how about this guy? And then it's really good to kind of curve them across the, like angle them to hold down the edge. So that's going to put more pressure on the edge than it being like that, you know? So edges are angled on the edge is what we're trying to go for. That guy on there. And then I'm going to change my bit. And this part, you can get this all set up ready to go before you even load your design. You can get this all set up. You want to get this all set up before we put the bit in there. And that's partly because we don't want you to gouge your hand. So once you've got this set up, then we'll put the bit in for you. Okay. All right, so I'm going to take that out real quick so I don't gouge my hand. And then we'll get that last one. All right, tight, 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 tight. It's not going anywhere. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to choose a different bit. Like I'm going to choose, how about this straight bit? No one ever chooses. Here, to not fall. Okay. All right, so get this out of the way. And then now, get that out of the way. So this is how it should look before we actually hit the carve button. And then we're gonna close the lid. So I just need to then go back. We're gonna go back to my easel. And then we have to make some adjustments. This design is not gonna quite work with what we put together. So I just wanna do a very quick test. And remember, we have to change. So this material is most like MDF. And then it is 8 inches by 6.5 inches. And then it was 0.53 inches. And then I have a 1/8 inch bit in there. We're gonna choose just a square. We're gonna make it not too deep. We're going to have it carve out that square right about there. And it should really only take about 13 minutes. Holy cow, a long time.
Nice.
What about that? That's a long time. We can always stop it too, but why would it take, that's what I'm wondering. Why would it take 13 minutes? Holy cow. A long time. I might be wrong, though. It might not actually take 13 minutes. Okay. Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay, so now once you've got it set up, you've got your material correct, you've got your bit correct, you're going to, let me get this a little bit closer. You're going to hit the carve button in the top right, and then it's asking us, oh, install the Easel driver. So I'm not 100% sure why it's asking us to do this. I think it's because the computer's been sitting for a little bit from the pandemic. So I need to just do this really quickly. There we go. It's going to ask me to do this. Yeah. So yeah, you guys won't have to do this part. It's going to be all done for you. I'm not entirely sure why it's asking me to do this, but perfect. Okay, cool. Alrighty. So now let's go back to carve. And then we can't find your machine automatically. So what we might need to do is turn it off, turn it back on. We need to make sure it's plugged in. That could be what's going on. Machine, Carvey. Wonder if it's this guy. Let's see. I bet that's it. Ah, okay. So in my moving of things, the cord came undone. Okay. All right. So now we've hit carve. It recognizes the machine. We make sure the material is selected, confirm. It's going to show you again, if you don't have it positioned correctly, this is going to show you how to do it. Next, next, material secure, confirm our bit size, and then now we're going to hit carve. So I'm going to stop the share, and we see our camera. And get this out of the way. So we can go back here. We're going to carve. So now you can hear it kick on, and it's going to come over. It's going to calibrate on that smart clamp.
Thanks for finding these masks.
Yeah.
And then it's going to get real loud. But anyway, so you can kind of see how it does. It goes and it is going to calibrate, and then it's going to start carving. And then from there, when it's done, it moves itself back, and then you can open the lid and you're good to go.
Cool.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we just got a little bit too much going on for the darn machine, but that's okay. And then I also think, yeah, the driver, like me having to reinstall that driver, I think it just needs that because it's been a little bit, but awesome. So do you guys have any other questions or anything that you're interested in about the machine?
No, I think you've done a great job, Eric. I'm so excited to try something.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah,
So
very helpful class.
as far as making appointments, is it just calling then and asking for an appointment?
Yeah, so you can call the LTI help desk. So in the handout I gave you, I also gave you how to contact us. So you can email us, you can give us a call, or when you call the library right now, it takes you to the call center, which then they can just direct you up here. But the best way to reach us is actually email right now. So,
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of really cool stuff that we can do with this machine. And then if you are going to make an appointment soon, we've also been down with the whole pandemic, everything's kind of a little bit wonky, but we'll make sure like I can get it ready to go for you. And then we can also, like, 6 feet apart, of course, but we can have a quick chat and get things going and make sure things are good. So
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much.
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. And with all the weirdness that can happen over Zoom, and thank you guys for being gracious and patient, and any questions, you can always reach out to me. I think you have my email from earlier today. So
Yep.
Thank you. Great class. Very helpful.
absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for participating. And when you do your first carve, like, you can get a piece of material for free.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Cool. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank
Thank you. Appreciate you. So
Okay. Bye.
have a
Bye.
great
Have a great weekend.
Bye.